Okay, welcome once again. Thank you very much for joining. You should be able to see my screen now. It says Quick SharePoint Facts. My name is Asif Rahmani. I'm from SharePointVideos.com, a principal contributor at SharePointVideos.com. And let me run through a few slides here to talk about SharePointVideos.com and also to talk about just how we can help. And then I'm going to introduce our presenter. That's Dux Raymond Sy, who'll be talking about Project Server, especially Project Server in SharePoint, of course. Well, the whole Project Server interface now is SharePoint anyway. So we'll get to that in just a couple of minutes. Here's some SharePoint facts which you may or may not know about. Of course, it's a huge business for Microsoft. Another reason that you may or may not know about that SharePoint projects fail, the main reason I should say, is the lack of user adoption, and that's key. That's where we fit in. We help SharePoint organizations worldwide help train their users, end users all the way to their developers, SharePoint administrators, understand and get the most value out of SharePoint. That's our motto, that's our mission, and we're always looking for feedback. So if you have any feedback on that, on the information that we have on our site, let us know. So on-demand training, as I mentioned, for end users, sub-site owners, power users, site collection admins, developers, IT professionals, everything. Here's our site, SharePointVideos.com. This number down here, the current video count, is actually incorrect right now. We have close to 310 or so videos, I believe, on our site currently, and we're posting more every other week. Powerful solutions, all created without code. That's our main statement. So our videos are approximately 10 to 15 minutes on the average, covering topics such as end-user functionality, SharePoint administration, SharePoint Designer, InfoPath, BCS, reporting services, branding, workflows, records management. There's a lot of videos that we have out there and a lot more coming. And a bunch of well-known authors like Raymond Mitchell, Bruce Hers, I'm part of it as well. I also do videos. Wendy Henry, John Holliday, his videos are coming up. So we have lots of different videos that we have on our site. Let us know if you have any thoughts or questions about that stuff. Here's some of the video content, some of the video topics, I should say, that we currently have on our site. Talking about external content types, chart web part, data view web part in SharePoint Designer, workflows in SharePoint Designer, and out of the box, installation, configuration of SharePoint in general, central administration, backup, recovery, you name it, we got it, or we're building it. We do single user licensing. So first of all, we have lots of videos on our site for free. There's about 3 dozen of them, so go ahead and take advantage of that. If you do want to become a member of the site, we have individual subscriptions, single user licensing. We also have DVDs for our videos for offline viewing. And we offer excuse me, we offer corporate licensing as well. So if you would like to train all your users, have a company-wide license, we can help you with that. Just let us know. Go onto our site, click on Contact Us, and let us know how we can help. Here's some of our current customers right now, and this is actually a partial list of it. We have a lot more people, a lot more companies who have our corporate licensing. And if we can help you become one of these people to help you with all your SharePoint education needs, definitely let us know. And that's about it for me. So what I'm going to do first is quickly verbally introduce Dux Raymond Sy. Dux Raymond Sy is a SharePoint MVP. He is a PMP as well, so a project management expert. He is also regarded as such in the SharePoint community. Dux's focus on project helps, I believe, really deliver that knowledge and that excitement around what you can do with project management and project server and project client, of course, in the whole SharePoint ecosystem. So as you know, people like myself who focus on other parts of SharePoint, Dux, as to my understanding, his focus is very much on project management, and that's a huge area, I believe, within how SharePoint helps companies. So Dux today is going to be focusing on project server specifically. There's another webinar that Dux did before, which was on project management in general in SharePoint, and that's also on our site. There's a recording for that on our site, so check that out. So with that, Dux, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Oh, thank you for your kind words, Asif. I just want to make sure I'm able to share my screen. will I be doing that, or let's see?
Yeah, let me go ahead and give it to you here, and then
Okay.
there we go.
Perfect, perfect.
And then I'll let you know if I can see your screen fine or not.
Yep. You should see my PowerPoint now.
Looking pretty good?
Good. Well, thank you again. Thank you for this opportunity, and thank you everyone joining us on this Monday. And really excited, very passionate about this area of project management. As Asif has mentioned, SharePoint is a great, wonderful platform, and you could do a lot of things with it. But one of the key areas, in case you don't know, that SharePoint and SharePoint-related technologies are being used for is in the area of project management. There was a research that came out by AIIM recently, and they said next to organizations using SharePoint as pretty much a file repository, the next thing people use it for is for project management related activities. It could be project collaboration, project management. So what I'm excited to talk about today is looking at how you effectively manage enterprise projects with Microsoft Project Server. I know a lot of you out there have heard about Project Server or even using it right now, but some of you might still be in the stage and you're wondering, okay, when do I use Project? When do I use SharePoint? When do I use Project Server? I'll make sure I answer that question in this session. So very excited. Again, thank you for this opportunity, Asif. So what we're going to do in this session is we'll look at how you use and maximize Microsoft Project Server as an enterprise project management platform. Now, for those that haven't heard about this acronym, or EPM, this is the idea of having a organization-wide technology platform to be used for the purposes of project and even portfolio management. And we'll talk more about that. We'll talk about how you create a portfolio project using new and existing Microsoft project plans. So I'll show you a lot of demos. I'll give you a 50,000-foot view, drill down further, and we'll go through a typical project lifecycle and see how we can take advantage of tools like Microsoft Project Server to help us. We'll talk about how we manage and optimize project resources across the enterprise. I don't know about you, in every organization I talk to and I work with, is resource management is one of the biggest challenges. I mean, think about it. How many of you out there are, let's say, with a department or with an organization, let's say IT, and you only have so many people, right? I see this a lot in IT, where, Dux, in my IT department, we only have 50 people, and then we keep getting all these projects from the business, and we're having a hard time trying to figure out who's doing what when, or can we take on more work. We're having a hard time trying to project our capacity in the next fiscal year. So we're going to see how a tool like Project Server can help us with that. We'll talk about how we collaborate with geographically distributed project team members using Project Web Access, and what you'll find and appreciate is what powers this capability is SharePoint. We'll talk about how we run a project and maximize Project Server and peripheral tools so that we can assign responsibilities and have our resources update us and allow us to easily track the project or portfolio projects. We'll talk about analyzing how our projects are doing. We'll look at how reports are built, how dashboards are built. We'll look at all these different tools. And last but not the least, we'll look at how we use SharePoint 2010, which is really the core, the heart and soul of Project Server, to maximize project collaboration. So a quick background about myself for those that I haven't met. Again, thank you for being here. My name is Dux Raymond Tsai. I'm a managing partner with Innovative E. We're based out of here in Washington, D.C. and Atlanta, Georgia, and we focus on helping organizations maximize the business value of SharePoint and related technologies. So we're pretty much experts around the technology, but more importantly, we help organizations and look at what are you trying to achieve from a business perspective, and we'll make sure SharePoint and related technologies like Project Server can help you with that. I wrote the book SharePoint for Project Management, and the 2010 version is actually coming out next month, so watch out for that. There's my contact info. Feel free to connect with me. If you're on Twitter, feel free to tweet during this session. My Twitter handle is MeetDux, and the hashtag for this session is MSProject. Okay? So with that being said, let's go ahead and get started. This will be the agenda for this session. As Asif has mentioned, there's a little question and answer chat feature in this tool, GoToMeeting. So feel free, if you have questions, just drop it there. And I'm sure Asif will alert me if there's any questions. And towards the end of the session, we'll open up the floor for Q&A as well. Okay? So let's get started here. My first question, before we even jump into looking at the technology, is I want to pose this question: is Project Server the silver bullet to help us with project management? Right? And to better align that question, I thought this picture sums it up nicely. I know some of you have seen this picture before, but I want to make sure I set the foundation of our conversation correctly. So this picture depicts a typical project environment, where the upper left shows a picture of a tree with with a swing with 3 chairs on it. This is how the customer explained it. Next to it, that's how the project leader understood what the customer said. You know, obviously the picture doesn't look the same, right? How the analyst designed it. How the programmer wrote it. Is that funny? How the consultant described it. Look at that. Really nice sofa with sun shining in the back and maybe angels singing. Ha! How the project was documented. What operations installed. How the customer was billed. How it was supported, and what the customer really needed. Now, why do you think these things happen in a project environment? Asif, why do you think this happens?
Lack of communication.
Lack of communication. Yeah, absolutely. Or irrelevant communication. Don't you love it when you get copied on every single freaking email that has nothing to do with you? Or maybe poor requirements. But it all boils down to not having a sound process, right? And it all boils down to people not being on the same page. Nowhere here does it say, well, Dux, because you don't have a great project management tool, that's why these things happen. Yeah, maybe that's a minimal factor. But if you look at these things happen primarily because lack of sound processes, right? And people are not being on the same page. And why do I say this? I want to make sure we get our priorities in order. Tools do not run projects. Realize that Project Server is a tool. To be successful in your project management initiatives, your organization should have relevant process, well-defined standards, people on the same page. And I know we're talking about a tool here, but I want to be clear, a tool is a tool is a tool. It's funny, when I work with customers, oftentimes they come up to me and say, Dux, we want Project Server. I go, why? Man, dead silence in the room, right? And sometimes I wonder if they understood my English, so I change it up a bit. I go, ¿por qué? But, you know, they'll laugh, but they'll say, you know, we want Project Server because our projects are behind. We want our projects on time, on budget, on schedule. Okay, but let's step back. Let's talk about where you are in the bigger picture. If you look at this picture, this is what I call the project management maturity. If you think about project management, tools is one of the 3 key components in any project management picture. And it's not an either or. The people, the process, the tools all come hand in hand. So what we're looking at here is where are organizations typically. So when we talk about level 1, it's pretty much immature in terms of their project management discipline. Level 2 is repeatable. Level 3 is defined. And most organizations are in level 1, whether we want to admit it or not. What we mean by that is, you know, people working on projects really don't have any PM background. If you think about it, this is so true today, especially in smaller scale projects, right? People in IT are told, hey, you work on this project. And what do? How did they get it done? You know, they just do it on the seat of their pants, ad hoc. What tools do people use? Paper, Word, Excel, email. Those are the tools of choice for project management. If you don't believe me, look up a research. You know, the #1 tool today for project management is email. Yep. Think about it. Where's that status report? Let me check my email. Where's that requirements document? Let me check my email. Right? So email is the #1 tool for project management. Now, we can see people in the organizations in level 1 maturity can get in trouble because, you know, again, there's no specific formalized structure or discipline. So what we should aspire to is move on to the next level. Now, the problem is when organizations get in trouble, they think, you know what, our projects are behind, things aren't going well, let's go ahead and slam a tool in there. Let's put in Project Server. So what they're essentially trying to do is jump level 1 maturity of tools to level 3, which is fine, but if the people and the process maturity doesn't jump along with it, what's going to happen? How many of you out there have Project Server and people don't care for it? How many of you out there have Project Server and people hate it, right? It's not because of the tool, but it was because these three things didn't mature hand in hand. So, you know, I talk a lot about this, but keep in mind, a tool is only as good as people in the process maturity. So what I suggest, you take baby steps. And that's where things like SharePoint can come in. You can take from initial level 1 maturity, you can do SharePoint. And then once you're past that maturity, you can do Project Server. I'll talk more about that, okay? So I just want to set the record straight and make sure that although I'm talking about Project Server in this session, you have to have your project management ducks in a row. No pun intended, but the right process, the right people, the right level of maturity. So what's the deal with enterprise project management? The idea of enterprise project management is looking at the whole organization where there's defined business processes, there's organizational policies, the right people, the actual tools to make this holistic initiative work. Again, the tool is just one piece of it. And looking at the tool, it's the idea of having what's called a PMIS. Some of you might be a PMP out there or certified project managers. PMIS is an industry term, and what a PMIS is a standardized set of tools so that you can use this to help you throughout your project lifecycle. Not only it helps you with communication, it helps you with collaboration, reporting, project tracking. So if we think about today, the PMIS of choice that people use is email. Email is the keychain that holds everything together, right? But it could be better. Email is not intended for that. So this is where tools like Project Server and even to a certain extent SharePoint can come in. These tools can serve as your PMIS. Now let's talk about Project Server. Quick background. So what's Project Server? Project Server is an enterprise project management tool that supports a lot of different things. Number one, it supports project schedule development and management. So if you think about a single project with Project Server and related technologies, you can create a project schedule and not only create it, but manage the schedule as well. Number two, Project Server helps us with resource management. It helps us to utilize a centralized repository so we can put all our project resources there and we can figure out who's available when, who's working on what when, and we can go back to history and see, okay, in quarter one, ducks worked this much hours, but of those many hours, 10% was over what we've estimated for. Why is that? So you could do things like that. Project Server can be used for reporting not only at a single project level, you can also do reporting at a portfolio level. And what we mean by portfolio, it's a collection of projects, be it related or not. So you could do things like, well, let's look at all the IT projects we did in Q1 of 2010, and let's compare it to Q1 of 2011. So you could do those kinds of things. Allows you to do collaboration for project teams and artifact management as well. So in short, Project Server is an organization-wide tool to support your project management initiatives. And again, this assumes you have some kind of project management process and discipline already in place. If you do not have that, this tool is just a tool, right? It works with Project Professional, which I'll show you. And Project Server is actually a technology that sits on top of SharePoint Server 2010 Enterprise. What that means is you have to have SharePoint Server Enterprise before you can even use Project Server 2010. If you have specific technical questions around this, I'd be happy to answer it later on. So that's Project Server. Now, how does it work? So I'm going to go through this quick diagram, and then I'll start doing a lot of demonstrations. And you see these numbers. I actually have a little step-by-step definition of this, but I'll just step through it with you. And then, by the way, you get a copy of this slide too. I'll make sure Asif gets this, and then you guys can have it too. So how does Project Server work, right? So at a very fundamental level, this is the idea of Project Server. So let's say a project manager creates a schedule for an upcoming project. So let's say that schedule is opening a coffee shop. So the project manager enters all the tasks, enters all the things that needs to be done, and puts in, defines who needs to do what. So once the project manager does that using Microsoft Project, so the project manager has to have Microsoft Project. Once the project manager does that, the project manager will now then, instead of saving it to his or her own desktop, the project manager will save it and publish it to Project Server. And by the way, I'll do this demo later on. Once that schedule is saved and published in Project Server, a couple of things happens. What happens is, number one, that information is now available on what's called Project Web Access, or PWA, or Project Web App, and it's essentially available on the browser. And not only is it available on the browser, once it's published, number two, whoever's involved in that project will be alerted. A notification will come through and say, hey docs, congratulations, you've just been assigned to do this work. Go and review it. So as the project team members get alerted, they can interact, they can review, they can update their task. I've worked on this 50%, 20%, etc. They can update it on a browser-based interface on Project Server. And this also means they do not need Microsoft Project on the desktop. So in theory, right now what we're seeing is only the project manager has Microsoft Project on the desktop. So once that update is done, Project Server will alert the project manager to say, hey, look, your resource just updated their task. Go ahead and review it. And if it looks good to you, you can approve it or reject it or update it, whatever. So all these activities and interactions gets captured in Project Server. Then number five, the project manager, after reviewing it, can approve or reject or update. Once he or she does that, the schedule and all the peripheral artifacts gets updated, and boom, again, the resource will be notified, and that's pretty much how the life cycle works. Now, for customers and executive management, number six, at any point in time, depending on who they are, they can access a specific project, they can look at the portfolio of projects, and look at reports that would interest them. Things like key performance indicators. Are we ahead? Are we behind? How's our resource capacity? So they can look at all that just directly from the browser. So in a nutshell, at a very foundational level, that's what Microsoft Project Server is all about. Now, these are the different things I've just described, so you can look at that later further in detail. So what I want to do next, after I talked about some of the basics and looked at the fundamentals of Project Server, I want to go through that whole life cycle, demonstrate how I do all this, and more importantly, how you maximize all the tools together. Okay? So let's get started with initiating and planning a project. So one of the things before you start using Project Server is you have to configure it based on your standards and processes. Again, I may sound like a broken record here, but I cannot stress hard enough that this is just a tool. Do not use the tool until you have some kind of standard. Now, if you're wondering, well, Docs, what are you talking about standards, right? What do you mean about processes? What are you talking about? Well, putting a Project Server won't do anything for your project management practices if you don't have any metrics defined. So for example, let's say when you're tracking a project, how do you track projects? Do you track it based on percent? Do you compare actuals in the baseline? Do you require your resource to enter it in multiple systems? Like, yeah, Docs, we have to enter our time in a separate HR timesheet. Then we have to enter it in Microsoft Project. So how do you do all these things? So before you have anything, or before you start talking about using Project Server, you have to have a standard. Now I'm going to show you another example of a process. Okay. So what I've got here is a sample project management process. Okay. So this very simplistic one. So let's say in this organization called Contoso, how does a project get started? Well, when a sponsor initiates, we decide go, no go, we assign a PM. What does the PM do? PM creates schedule, assigns team member. What does a team member do? Portfolio owner, etc. You got to have something like this before you start using the tool, or else it's not going to be worthwhile. Okay. Next, once you have your process, the very first thing you got to do once Project Server is in place, you got to define what these standards are, right? And how do you do that? You do it through what's called the Enterprise Global Template and the Enterprise Resource Pool. Now, we don't have all the time in the world to describe every single detail of these two things, but essentially, the Enterprise Global Template would allow you to define standards in your organization. It could be things like, okay, company calendar. Yep, so you can put in all your company holidays, you can put in your company work hours, etc. So that's what you do with the global template. With the Enterprise Resource Pool, that's where you put in all the resources that you're going to have and use for your organization. So how do you put those things in? How do you configure those things? There's a couple of ways to do it, but let me bring it up for you here real quick. So I've got Project Server up, okay? This is Project Server environment, okay? And I'll show you more of these later on, but under server settings, see they have a lot of different things that's going on. So you got your Enterprise Global Template, and in the Enterprise Global you can define views, reports, all that good stuff. Yeah, and the same goes with the Enterprise Resource Pool. So let me go to my resource Project Server Resource Center here. So notice I've got all my resources here, right? And these things have to be pre-populated initially before you even start using the tool. So you can define the resource, you can define their information, their rates, etc., etc. So those are the first things you have to do before you start using the tool. Next, once you have your Enterprise Global Template and Enterprise Resource Pool defined, you can start using the tool. You can start creating your schedule. Before creating a Microsoft project plan, make sure that from a process standpoint, from a project management standard standpoint, make sure your initiation activities have been completed. You start doing your project planning. And it's critical that you have your work breakdown structure defined. And what a work breakdown structure is, it's essentially understanding what are the tasks needed for doing that specific project. Okay? So for example, let's do a little pretend here. Let's say, let me just carry on my story here. So let's say our project is to open a coffee shop somewhere, because we're a coffee company and I'm a project manager. I open coffee shops around the world. So based on that project, open a coffee shop, this is the work breakdown structure that was defined. Now, what a work breakdown structure is, again, it allows me to define different things we have to do. And you don't have to use Microsoft Project for that. You can use a whiteboard, you can use Excel, you can use WBS Chart Pro, but you got to have these first. So these are different things we need to do. And these are the estimates of these different activities. And again, the estimates I put here is what's called duration-based estimates. Now you have to be clear on what kind of estimates you're putting in. Now what a duration-based estimate means is I'm estimating based on elapsed time. For example, like this webinar, this is a 1-hour webinar. No matter how many people attended this webinar, it's always going to be a 1-hour webinar. So even if we have 500 people here, it's going to be 1 hour. So that's what we call duration-based estimates. Whereas some of the projects has what's called effort-based estimates, where if you throw more people, the duration decreases. So my point is, you got to know what you're doing. You got to know what kind of estimates you're putting in to maximize a tool like Project Server. Okay? Once you have your WBS available, you can go ahead and start creating your project plan. Okay, so how does this work? So to take advantage of Microsoft Project Server, the very first thing you got to do is you open up Microsoft Project. In fact, let me go ahead and close this because I want to show you. Okay. Actually, let me close. I was playing around with it. Discard changes. Okay. There you go. So I'm going to open Microsoft Project, and I want to show you what happens. So when you use Project Server, one of the things that you have to do is you have to connect Microsoft Project with Project Server. I already did that earlier. So when I first opened Project, it asked me, where do you want to connect? To your local computer or to your Project Server environment? So I'm going to click OK. So what it's going to do, it's going to ask for my password. And when I hit OK, what you'll see is, if you're familiar with Microsoft Project 2010, it'll look exactly the same, but the difference is I'm connected to Project Server currently. So anytime I save, I publish this project schedule, it's going to save and publish on Project Server. It's not going to save on my local machine. Okay? So the first step is to start a new project. Okay? And then enter task, enter estimates. Okay, so let me go and do that. So I open up this project file. I'm going to do a couple of things. So I'm going to say, okay, this project will start on November 28th. All right. And I'm going to save this, even if I don't have anything here. I'm going to call this the Chicago Cafe Project. All right. And notice there's a lot of different fields that are predefined. This is part of setting up the global template. We have different custom fields that we capture in our company called SharePoint Cafe. Notice that we have a bunch of different calendars. And again, this is part of the global template that was defined. So now let me hit save. And once I hit save, I know nothing's there yet, but at least this project schedule or this project plan is on Microsoft Project Server. Next, what do I do next? The next step is to enter your task and estimates. So what I'm going to do here, just to save time, I already pre-typed it. This is my work breakdown structure. And let me paste it. Okay, let me go ahead and paste it. All right. And in fact, let me insert another task, and this task will be called start. It's my start task. And this will have a 0 duration. So I've entered my task and I've entered my estimates. Okay. The next thing I want to do is make sure that Microsoft Project automatically schedules these tasks. You see, Microsoft Project is a scheduling tool. What I want help from is help me figure out how and when these things will happen. And in order to do that, I can highlight all my tasks and estimates, and I can go to what's called the Task tab. This is a new feature, by the way. By default, Microsoft Project is now set to manually schedule, which is not there before. What that does is it doesn't automatically schedule things for you, but I want it to be auto-scheduled, so it's going to help me figure out when certain things should be done. So now that I've set it to auto-schedule, all right, let's go back to our PowerPoint here. I've started a new project, enter the task, enter the estimates. The next thing I want to do is establish dependencies. So I want to define what happens first, what happens next. Okay. So there's a lot of different ways to do this, but my favorite way of defining dependencies and relationships is through the use of what's called the network diagram view. So I'm in the network diagram view, and literally establishing dependencies is connecting the dots. So when I get started in a project, first thing I'm going to do is write project charter. And after I do that, conduct risk assessment, also construct stakeholder communication plan. Once I've got that, we can identify local business qualification requirements. Do that too. I can secure site. So as you can see, it's a matter of connecting the dots, but essentially what's happening here is Microsoft Project is figuring out, based on the dependencies and based on the estimates, when these things should happen. So just to for the purposes of this presentation, just to make things faster here, I will just assume that every task has what's called a finish to start relationship, meaning one has to happen first before the next one. And notice that based on the dependencies, we see that for this project, if we get started on November 28th, it won't be completed until April 25th, 2013. Wow, looks like a big project. Now, certainly we can change this if we start updating the dependencies to have certain things happen at the same time. Okay? But the beauty of Microsoft Project, again, friends, is it enables you to figure out when certain things should happen. I'm not saying you have to agree with it, but based on the criteria, based on the dependencies, it looks like you won't get done until April 25, 2013. Okay, that's cool. Let me hit save. And let's go back and see what the next step is. So I've started a new project, entered tasks, entered estimates, established dependencies. The next step is to build a project team. Now, this is a little bit different than what we're used to with plain Microsoft Project. Now, if you're using Project Server, this assumes that you've already defined your enterprise resource pool. Okay? So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the Resource tab, okay, and I will click Add Resources and say Build Team from the Enterprise. So what we're doing here is Microsoft Project is contacting the resource pool in Project Server, and it's going to show me all the resources that I have. Now, certainly I can do a lot of different things. I can run filters. I can say, show me only those that are available between these dates, or show me only those that have this skill set, or show me only those that cost $10 an hour. So you can do all those things, right? You can do all those things. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to start populating, picking resources. I'm going to use ducks, all right? I'm going to use Tom here, all right? So I pick a couple of resources. I'll click OK, and once I pick resources, okay, notice that if I go to my resource sheet, notice that all my resources are there. Okay. Now, once I've got my resources, the next thing I want to do is I'm going to go ahead and start assigning resources to tasks. So what I've got going on here, all right. So let me just highlight a couple of these tasks here. So I'm going to highlight the first 10 or 12 tasks, and I'm going to assign ducks to work on it. All right. And what I'm going to show you is I will insert a column called work. Okay, check this out. Notice that work right now, unless there's resources assigned, for those that don't have any resources, it's still 0 hours. But for those tasks that I've assigned ducks to, notice that it calculated based on ducks' availability. So ducks by default is available 8 hours a day, right? So this is 5 days, that's 40 hours. So there you go. Now, notice in task 3 and 4, there's little red stuff. Okay, what does that mean? If you see that red thing, it means that ducks is assigned more work than he can do. That's what we call over-allocation. To see it better, what I can do is go to a view called the resource graph. Let's look at ducks. Okay, and what this is saying is on December 5th and 6th, looks like ducks is asked to work 200% of his availability. So that means ducks is asked to work 16 hours a day for those 2 days. What's a big deal, ducks? You know, that's what we do every day anyways. All right, cool. That's fine. But having a tool like this gives you into visibility of things like over allocation. So if we go back to the Gantt chart, there we go. Go back to the Gantt chart. And if you want to see when that over allocation happens, again, it's these 2 tasks. So if you see, notice there's 2 tasks that are happening at the same time, and we assign both of those tasks to a single resource. Okay? So now, what else? What else? What we're going to do is we will assign the remaining tasks to the remaining resources. So I'm going to assign both Cherise and we assign Tom. All right. There you go. So now 2 people has been assigned to it for the remaining task. And let me hit save. All right. So I built my team. I've assigned the resources to tasks. What's next? The next thing is, so let's say we're about ready to make this available to everybody because we want to make sure that the resources that was assigned to these tasks know about these and have them review it as well. So what I could do is I can go to File and say Publish. And once I publish, this information, number 1, will be made available to what's called Project Web App. And also, it's also asking me, would you like to create a site for this project? And what this means, it's going to create a separate SharePoint site. So any kind of collaboration that's needed other than tracking task updates and tracking people's updates, you can have a place where you can collaborate. So things like documents, discussion boards, all that good stuff. So it's asking me, okay, do you want to create a project site as well? And this is pretty much a SharePoint-based site template. So I'll hit sure, why not? Publish. So once that's done, what happens? So once you publish a Microsoft project plan, let me go back to PWA. So you log into your PWA environment, okay? So go back to Project Web App environment. And for those that are not familiar, this should look very similar to SharePoint 2010. And like I said, Project Server it sits on top of SharePoint 2010. So a lot of the user interface and navigation and ribbon interface are very similar. Now, the fact that I've published the projects, what happens? A couple of things happen. When I published it, those that have been assigned work will be notified. So I'm logged in as me, as Dux. So if I look at my task, you have 91 tasks assigned to you. So when I click on that, what it's going to show me, it's going to show me all the projects I'm assigned to and all the tasks that I'm assigned to as well. So when I click on that, so there's a lot of different projects that's going on. So there's one, Project Chicago Cafe Project. And notice that there's 2 separate sets because what this is looking at is a time period. So this is looking at next week, the week of November 28th, 2 weeks from now, and then the week of the remainder, December 5th until the end of the project. So it's showing me all the tasks that I'm assigned to, conduct initial assessment, all that good stuff. So a benefit here is if you think about it, if you're just using Microsoft Project, traditionally, how do you communicate all this? Well, we end up emailing Microsoft Project file around, and you know what happens to that, right? That's not a good thing. Whereas with this, only the project manager has control over the Microsoft Project file. Once it's published to Project Server, there's a web-based interface that your users can go to, and your users can review and update tasks that are related to them. So I can see it on the browser. What else? So once we publish the project, I can go to Project Web App and look at what's called Project Center. And what Project Center will show me, it'll show me all the projects available that I have access to. And since I'm the server administrator, I have access to a lot of different projects, so I can see a lot of stuff. But one of the projects that I'm obviously interested in is the Chicago Cafe project. Okay. So if I click on the Chicago Cafe project, right, I can see all the tasks on the browser level, and this should look very similar to the Gantt view or that Microsoft project file I have on my desktop. So that's one thing. Another thing is if I go back and I highlight that project, if I look at the ribbon interface, there is a selection called Project Site. When I click on it, notice that it's nothing but a Microsoft SharePoint site, but the idea is this is where the team can collaborate. Anything other than the actual schedule, we can put all the project documents here. We can document all the issues and the risks. We can put in any kind of discussion that that we have for the project. So once published, we have a project site powered by SharePoint created for the team to collaborate. Okay, so those are just some quick step-by-step process. If you're interested to learn more about Microsoft Project 2010, just go to this URL. I did a 2-hour session for Microsoft Press O'Reilly Media on how you maximize Project 2010, and you can watch that. Next, so we talked about how you get started and how you create your project plan and publish it to Project Server. How can you take advantage of collaborative tools in Project Server? I mean, if you think about it, you talk about collaboration, there's a lot of collaborative activities that happens in your project environment. First off, right, what are some of the typical collaborative activities that we do? Things like working on requirements, things like updating tasks, things like creating proposals, reports. So there's a lot of different things we do. SharePoint provides a lot of these collaborative tools, and I'm sure a lot of you know about it already. But from a project management perspective, I really enjoy using SharePoint to maximize collaboration other than just sending emails. So for example, let me show you some examples that how I use SharePoint for. So for example, let's say, at least in my company, when we use, obviously we're a consulting organization, we work on a lot of projects. So one of the things we do whenever we have a project, we have a site like this, and we make sure we put all our conversations, all our communication that's project related onto a discussion board. So for example, when is testing? Now, why do we do that? Well, in the spirit of centralizing all the communication not on somebody's email, we can centralize all the project related communication in Microsoft on a SharePoint site. Now, even better, since SharePoint and Project Server are all part of the Microsoft family of products, I know a lot of us are so used to Outlook, and in terms of communications, we just, respond and react easily just firing up an email. So what I could do is I can actually take this discussion conversation and connect it to Outlook, and all I have to do is do it one time, right? So once I do that, what's going to happen is from this point onwards, all the discussion board conversations, so let's say yes, this is actually my, there you go, all right. All right, so from this point onwards, what we're seeing here is, check that out. All the postings on your project site would now be made available in my copy of Outlook. Well, not only is it available, right, I can reply and say, testing is next week, as if I was replying to an email. So when I hit post, what do I have? When I hit post, let me hit refresh here. Okay, it still hasn't synced up, but when I hit post, let me make sure it did it sync up. Yeah. So give me a second. It should take a minute or two, but once it syncs up, I should see the information. You know what? Let me force this real quick. Send and receive. Testing is next week. Okay, so it shows up on my Outlook. Let me double check here. It's still not posted, but I'll come back later. But the idea is the discussion posting will be fed back to the discussion board on the project site. So everything's centralized. And the beauty of this is down the road, if we have any questions on anything, we can run a search, and other than documents, risk, issues, any of the conversation posts up. It's a great collaboration tool. Same with a very simple document library. I can upload files, so where I can centralize this for my team. And again, this is, basic SharePoint capabilities, and now I can maximize all this since it's part of the Microsoft family of tools. And since project server sits on top of SharePoint. I can maximize all the power of SharePoint as well. Okay, so let me, you know what? Let me save this file. I'm going to show you this file later, but let me just save it to my desktop. Okay. I'll save it to my desktop. Hit save. Okay. And let me come back here. And on the desktop, there you go. Simple Word document. Click OK. All right. It's uploading it. So again, very simple things, but let's see. This is final. This is good. Right, very simple things that you can maximize in conjunction with Project Server. And certainly, not only can you upload it, the beauty of SharePoint 2010 with out-of-the-box capabilities like Office Web Apps, you know, my resources can work on it not only directly in Word, but they can view it on the browser, right? They can edit, they can open it in the browser, it's coming up, but not only open it, they can edit it in the browser as well. Office Web Apps works for not only Word, it works for Word, Excel, PowerPoint, OneNote. Very powerful stuff. And in fact, it's not even limited to the Windows environment. I could do all this in Safari, in my Mac environment, on an iPad, on my Windows phone. So you talk about collaboration, you have these suite of tools that you can take advantage of. Now, once you have the project going, you want to start tracking, you want to start reporting. So how do you do that with Project Server? So obviously one of the key things you have to know based on your process, based on your standard is what are you tracking? Almost always people track schedule, people track budget. But that's at a project level. But what about at a portfolio level? Management might want to track how are our projects doing? What's the resources doing? So you can easily do all this with tools like Project and Project Server. So how do you track in Project Server? The idea is once you're about to run your project, one of the things that has to happen is your project schedule should be baselined, which means you have a good copy of what you plan for. And the key steps is your resource would enter the updates from Project Web App, so from the browser, right? And once they do that, the project manager would have to approve or reject the update to see, you know, if it's something that that they agree to or not. And once the PM does that, the project schedule gets republished, and certainly if the schedule changes a lot, the new schedule would show up on Project Server. So let's try this out, okay? So a couple of things I'm going to do. Let me get out of this Project Web App here. Let me go back to Microsoft Project, and what I'm going to do is I will baseline this project schedule. If you're not familiar with this concept, the idea of baselining is taking a good picture of this project so that once we start running the project, we'll have all the original information captured so we can compare it against that. So if I look at what's called a tracking Gantt view, so notice I have two sets of data, right? Notice that this is what's called the Gantt chart. We have both the task in this tabular form and these little bars. Notice that there's two sets. There's the red and the black, the blue and the black. The black one is called the baseline. That will not change. Once the actuals are entered, the baseline information will be used to compare against the actual. So the idea is the resource would go to their to Project Web App, and they would update their task. So let me go and do that. So keep in mind in this demonstration, I am both the resource and the project manager. So one of the tasks I have, all right, for this week is to write project charter. So what I could do is when I click on write project charter, okay, still loading here. You know, my part of our process, okay, part of our process is I have to tell my boss, right, when I started and when I finished and how much work I did. That's part of our process, right? or I could just put % complete. But if your process is different, I'm not saying you have to do it this way. So this is the part where you tweak the global template to behave how your process is. I know some organizations, they don't use % complete. I know some organizations only capture actual start and finish, or some just capture actual time, right? So let's say I actually start on 11. I didn't start on 11/28. I started in 12/2/2011, and I finished on 12/10/2011. All right, and there's no more remaining work, and it's 100% done. Okay, so I spent, you know, those days working on it. Let me hit recalculate. So it's going to do the math for me. All right, and it says, okay, so you worked total 6 days, whatever. So let me hit save. So as a resource, as I'm working on my task, I can enter all the things I've done. Now, as I've entered these tasks, one thing that doesn't happen is my project manager won't know about it until, until I send it to my project manager, okay? So now, let me go back and show you another example. Man, there's so much stuff assigned to me. Let me show you another example. Let me go back to my task, and let me go back to Chicago Cafe project here. Conduct an initial risk assessment. So let me enter this. Okay, so this, I did it on time, 100%. You know, I'm done. And let me hit send. So it saves and sends my changes for approval. We're all good. Okay, so if you think about that life cycle here, again, project manager creates schedule, publishes it to project server alerts resource goes to project web app to update what they've done, and then it goes back to the PM. The PM would need to review, approve, or reject what the resource has done. So if we look at this steps here, right? Let's go back. Resource enter updates. PMs approves or reject updates. Project schedule gets republished. So if I go back, look at this. When I logged in, it says 2 task updates from resources that requires your approval. So what that means is even after the resource updates it, the schedule will not automatically change, which makes sense because you don't want to, you know, affect everybody else's work, especially if the resource puts in wrong information. And the PM would look at what he or she needs to approve, okay? And let's say, well, this has to be updated, conduct initial risk assessment. Either they can accept or reject, can preview the update. And what that means is, based on that update, what's the impact of the rest of the project, okay? So right now, everything looks good. Notice that the right project charter is still not updated, or it's not reflective of the delay yet, okay, because I didn't send it to the PM yet. In fact, let me go ahead and do that. Let me go back to my task list as a resource, because I want to show you how all this gets impacted. Let me view, oops. The all completed task, yeah, right project charter, there you go. So let me send this to my PM, because notice you'll see how this impacts the rest of the project. Okay, so now let's go back to my home page, because keep in mind I'm also the PM, so I'm the PM here. All right, so write project charter. So I can check that box, and let me look at preview updates. Check this out, friends. Notice that because write project charter was delayed, notice how it pushed out the rest of the project. So what's going to happen here? I got to call my resource. Hey, why are you behind on that? Well, it took longer than I expected. It is what it is. Sorry, boss. Okay, that's fine. So with that being said, okay, let's go back to my approval center, and let me go ahead and accept that change. Okay, you are behind, so better catch up. So I'm going to click OK. There you go. What it's going to do then, it's going to update the schedule, republish it, right? So now when I look at that project, that Chicago project, so if I look at Chicago Cafe project, there you go, I can now see, right? Oops, let me go back. In fact, close this guy real quick. I'm sorry. Let me go back and finish up these updates as well. Forgot to finish to accept all that. There you go. So now let me go to my project center, and let me highlight this project, and let me open it in Microsoft Project. All right. So what that's going to do is, because I wanted to show you what that schedule would look like in Microsoft Project based on those updates. Yeah, it might take a few seconds there. But the point being is, if you think about that life cycle I discussed earlier, that's how the picture would look like. So once you publish it, resources are just interacting with a web-based interface. Project Manager will get alerted via email too, and they can log into Project Web App, and they can review and look at the updates there. So really, the only person that would need Project Professional on the desktop is the Project Manager. Next, what else? Reporting. What are the different things can you look at with Project Server? Obviously, there's a lot of different kinds of reports that are available on the desktop tool. But similarly, these reports or reporting capabilities are also available on your browser. Let's see. Oh, let me hit cancel here. Yeah, let me go ahead and close this. Okay. And in fact, let me close my Outlook as well so that any of my emails won't distract us. And let me go ahead and open the Chicago Cafe project again. And while that's opening, okay, so my internet connectivity here, I want to show you a couple of reports or reporting capabilities. So first, I want to talk about resource reports. So one of the challenges we have in organizations is really understanding who's doing what when, right? So I'm going to highlight, I went to the resource center, I've got Dux, I've got Charisse, and I'm going to click on resource availability. So what this will do is it will show, okay, Dux, since Charisse, during this date range, okay, these two other people aren't doing anything, so it's just showing me Dux. So it's showing me how much working hours Dux is working on during that week, so 40 hours, 60 hours, right? It could give me a breakdown of my resource. So Dux, what's his availability and capacity? Look at the week of December 5. Dux is available negative 16 hours, meaning he's doing more work than he's available for, right? And also it shows me from a project level. Chicago Cafe project, Dux is working. These are all the different projects Dux is on, etc. So very, very powerful reporting capability. What else? There are other things. Let's say you want to report, against doing some kind of portfolio analysis. And this is the part now, again, where standards and processes are important, because you got to figure out what you want to measure. So what I'm showing here is this is a sample analysis of Okay, what are we trying to measure? Different drivers, different groups, costing, date range, all that good stuff. So this tool allows us to do that. You could do a lot of business intelligence type of capabilities, and this is using SharePoint capabilities, your performance point, Excel services, chart web part, right? So a lot of really powerful capabilities that Project Server utilizes out of SharePoint. And last but not the least, from a portfolio level, I can look at the big picture and look at all my projects, how they're doing, what's ahead, what's behind, what's in motion, all that good stuff. So let's see this open up. So here, this is what we're seeing so far, going back to my Chicago Cafe project. Notice that what it's saying here is, look, task 1 was so behind that it pushed all the other tasks. Although task 2 was done on time, what does this mean? With Project Pro, I can slice and dice it, right? I can say, okay, show me what's called the variance table, because I want to see, I'm sorry, tables, that's what I want. I want to see, okay, where we're at versus what we planned for. So the way things are going, Ducks, looks like, you know, task 1 was 5 days behind. That made everything 5 days behind. So our original plan was to be completed on April 25, but the way things are going looks like we'll get done on May 2nd, 2013. So right now maybe it's no big deal. We just started. We can catch up. But having a tool like this gives you an insight to, especially as a project manager, and how you can plan, how you can adjust. Okay? So very powerful stuff. Now, with that, you know, certainly, again, there's a lot of other capabilities, but my intent was just to show you a big picture. Now, along that lines, what I wanted to show you, too, is there's a solution out there, and this is free, and this is called Microsoft Project for the Masses. This is really a guidance for mid-sized organizations with resource and schedule management challenges. In short, this is a recipe step-by-step guide that you can use for free on how you can tweak your Microsoft Project environment, Project Server environment, for resource management. Now, where can you get this Microsoft Project for the Masses solution? So all you have to do is, by the way, we work with Microsoft on this, and it's on the Microsoft site. It's called Microsoft Project for the Masses. What you can get is a white paper, step-by-step guidance, not only on technical configuration, but what you get in this white paper is a bunch of videos, right? Like Asif was saying how SharePoint Videos has a lot of videos. So that's the intent as well. This is really a proof of concept, and the idea is you're an organization, like an IT organization, with limited number of people. You want to figure out who's doing what when at any given point in time. This is what the solution is for. So you have videos on how you configure, how to use it. You have templates, and it's all free. It's on the Microsoft site. And so it's right there. And you can also get to it from my company website. You can go to Innovative E. Under Community, it's called Microsoft Project for the Masses. So you can download all the white papers, templates, guidance on how you configure Project Server to help manage your resources effectively. Okay? So hopefully you'll find that useful. And hopefully this session was beneficial for everybody. I'm respectful of everybody's time here. I'm just looking at my watch. We're about 5 more minutes before we get done. So, Asif, did we have questions?
Absolutely.
I'm not sure. Go for it. So
Oh, yeah. First of all, thank you very much. I think it was really good information as well. I learned a lot of good tidbits from it as well, personally. So thank you.
Good.
Let's see. I'll start off, and you can look at the question panel too, Doug's. But I'll start off shooting a few things at you. David was asking, will Ducks cover assigning multiple resources to one task? I'm not sure if you did that or not.
Yeah, so I did not do it. That's more of a project question. There's a link I gave earlier. I spent a lot of time talking about that, and I'm not sure what the question was about. Assigning resources to multiple tasks is a straightforward activity, literally. I suspect what you're asking about is how do you track them. So literally, I could go to my tasks and have assigned resources, and I can, assign multiple resources. That's straightforward. But I think what the question comes up to is, okay, either how do we divvy up the work, or how do you update the task and all that stuff. I covered that more in detail in one of the webinars I did, which I have the link for. But if you have any specific question, feel free to ask it here or drop me an email. I'd be more than happy to address that.
And then there's another one by Melody here. You can probably see that there are also some PM in my organization created a SharePoint team site per project in addition to the project site on PWA. Is there a way to connect those two?
Is there a way to connect those two? Very good question. The way the technology is, it's two separate things. I know what you're saying. So if we look at it, if I go to my project site, let me go back here. So literally, let me minimize GoToMeeting here. So let me go to my project center. So really, from PWA, the connection, if you may, the connection to my project site is I have to highlight my project and say go to project site. Now what I suspect you're asking, well, Dux, is there a way to surface the Gantt chart in my project site? Is there a way for my resource to update their stuff in the project site? The answer, unfortunately, is no. It's two separate things. However, there are certain web parts, though, that are available in your project site that you can surface the project data. But the actual act of updating and reviewing reports and all that, that happens in PWA. It's not done on the project site.
Okay. Melody had something else as well. I couldn't quite understand it completely myself, but you might want to read it. It says, do you have a good governance suggestion so there are no double utilities and double entries? And this is in regards to this question as well.
Governance suggestions. It boils down to process and standards. And again, I think I know what you're saying. In organizations, well, Dux, some people use Project Server, some people use SharePoint, some people use Excel. How do we make sure we're all standardized? Well, first things first, tools aside, you got to have a sponsor that will say this is our way or it's the highway. I mean, it might sound harsh, but you have to be disciplined. You have to have a standardized process for everybody. And if you're thinking, well, Dux, we can't make people do that, well, you got to find somebody, first of all, to show them the value of doing this, using this tool in a standardized way. And second, having that authority figure mandate that this is how we're going to do it. So my governance suggestion is find that executive sponsor.
Makes sense. Absolutely. Another one here. By the way, there's a lot of people asking for the PowerPoint deck. And so when we put up the recording, if Dux, you provide me the deck, I'll go ahead and link it to the recording as well.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's going to be $10 a download. That's great. No, just kidding.
Sounds good. All right, so here's another one. Shashi is asking for how many minimum resources is Project Server advisable? So I guess
so resources taking care of it, managing it, or actual resources in the resource pool? I'm not quite sure.
Yeah, the way I took this question is, when, and I'm not sure if this is exactly what Shashi means over here, but when do you really need Project Server? I mean, so this is a question combined with my own question as well, Dux, for you, that I know there are project management processes that you can put directly on top of vanilla SharePoint without getting Project Server. So when do you know that you should get Project Server?
So that's a great question. So here's my perspective from the whole SharePoint maturity, right? So we talked about maturity. Well, people use email. That doesn't work. Let's step up. Let's use out-of-the-box SharePoint because we can use Project Task List, Document Library, all that good stuff. But when you get into a point where you're working on multiple projects, for example, and then the same set of resources, in my opinion, that's a great candidate for a Project Server. Because now you're trying to figure out, well, typical IT organization. IT only has 40 people. But the business keeps coming with, well, can you do this? Can you do that? Can you do a new release of that? You get all these requests coming in. Managing each project in a SharePoint site is doable, but what about if you have the same people, right? Now you got to figure out, well, who's available? Who's working on what? out-of-the-box vanilla SharePoint can't handle that. So what I'm seeing where Project Server comes in, at least as a first step, it's in the area of resource management. Hence that Project Server for the masses. I work with Microsoft on that. We publish that because that's a big need in the enterprise today, especially in this economic environment where you can't just hire people and the resources are limited. Project Server is really, really good in helping you manage, forecast your resources. One of the challenges I find a lot with IT organizations is at the end of the year when the CIO needs to make a budget for next year, they need to make a case. I need 5 more FTEs for next year. Okay, prove it. Now, how do you prove it? It's so hard to prove that you know you need more resource, but it's so hard to prove, right? Whereas if you have a tool like Project Server where it's capturing all this data, how resources are being utilized, I think from a simplistic standpoint, when you graduate out of vanilla SharePoint, I think it's when you have that first need of being able to manage resources, being able to forecast, and understand what your resource capacity is.
Great. I'll do one more, and then I think we'll have to hang up. It's about our time. Jim is asking, our developers are already tracking time against tasks in TFS. Do they have to do it in PWA as well?
The answer is complex there. Yes and no. There's actually a TFS integration with Project Server. So depending on how you configure Project Server in TFS, the answer is no, right? But there's more to it, so that's why my answer is yes and no. But they don't have to. You don't have to, but you got to make sure the integration is done appropriately. There is actually, you go to the TFS website and you just look it up. There's some integration guidance that you could do with Project Server.
Great. Well, wonderful. Thank you very much, Dux. Appreciate it. I think this has
you're welcome.
This has been very beneficial for all parties. I think so. This is great.
Good.
Folks, we will have a recording of this thing, of this whole webinar on the SharePointVideos.com site. If you go to the free videos tab, you're going to find all the past webinars and as well as this webinar recording that's going to be on there. It might take us a couple of days to get it up there, but it will be up there for sure. Well, once again, thank you very much, everybody, for joining. Thanks for giving us your time, and hopefully this was beneficial to you. And thank you, Dux.
Thank you. Well, enjoy the rest of the weeks. Take care.
All right. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.